Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday, December 9th, Pullman Police Advisory Committee. I am Stephanie Rink, the chair of the committee, and I welcome you all tonight. We will go ahead and do roll call, and we will start on my right.
So let me introduce our guest tonight is WSU Police Chief Bill Gardner.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Darby Baldwin, Administrative Assistant to the Chief of Police.
Gary Jenkins, Pullman Police Chief.
Greg Wilson from Pioneer Hill.
Eric South Business Community.
And Vice Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an important role. Say I am Vice Chair as well. Stephanie Rink, I'm also the Pullman School District Parent Representative.
Isabel Macon, Student High School Representative.
David Macon, Multicultural Representative.
Angela Brown, Multicultural.
Mira Bakshi, GPSA Representative.
Krista Gross, the Pullman at-large member.
Philippe Mucento, Military Hill Representative.
Wonderful. Next item of business is our approval of minutes, where I am sure everyone is well versed in our minutes and have read them all. Any questions, comments, concerns, edits?
I will make a motion to approve them.
Second.
All in favor to approve the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Moving on, we have a wonderful presentation by Chief Bill Gardner. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
You're welcome. Well, I really hope that I can give you something workable or something useful tonight. But I want to ask a question first. Does anybody in the room know, and that includes anybody in the room, know the year that the WSU Police Department came into being?
1972.
I've got one guess, 72. Anybody earlier, later? Anybody want to take that one? Nobody? Nobody?
Oh, come on. We all can guess a year. Come on.
You could all just throw out years.
I'm going to go 58.
Whoa, okay, closer. 1950. And it started in January of 1950. In 1949, Pullman experienced a what we would call now some sort of an active shooter incident, but at the time it was called the Easter Massacre. And the Easter Massacre involved the death of two police officers, a Pullman police officer and a county deputy, civilian, and the suspect. And it ranged, the incident actually started on campus and came down here to what used to be, well, I guess it still is a gas station down here on the corner of Paradise and Main, and then made its way down to the area between what used to be the Pullman Tractor Building, which is now, used to be a fitness center, and I don't think it is now. I don't know what that building is called, but across the street from Cougar Country.
Right.
And the shooter was in the shrubbery on the hill behind Cougar Country. And that was Easter Day, 1949. As a result of that, the WSU Board of Regents met and discussed the formation of their own police department. And by January, they had hired 12 police officers, and they took over policing the college boundaries. I can't really tell you what the feelings were. I don't know if this was an attempt by WSU to help the public safety infrastructure in the city, or if it was a, hey, if you can't do it right, we'll do it right, kind of a thing. Could have been a lot of all of that, and I'm just not sure what that response was. But those 12 officers took over policing that area, and so we have a fairly long historical relationship. And I'll give you some of the good and the bad a little bit just to characterize that. But first I want to talk a little bit about jurisdiction. WSU has statutory jurisdiction of all state-owned lands, or campus lands, used primarily for research and education. That's statutorily what our jurisdiction is. I heard one of my officers who gives a lot of presentations said, describes our jurisdiction as the county has a big area, they drive big circles, the city has a smaller area, they drive a little bit smaller circles, and WSU has a small area and they drive little teeny circles. So You can go the statutory route, or you can take the circles route, but WSU and Pullman have been a little bit like siblings. So we get along and we back each other, and we all know we have a responsibility to the community. But like all siblings, there are issues. I'm just going to give you one, and it's old. It's not that old, because I remember it, but it's old. It's like 30 years old. There was a bombing of a phone booth in 1990. Somebody lit off a small explosive in a phone booth on the intersection of Valley Road and Merman Drive. You're nodding your head, so I shouldn't tell this story. You're nodding because you know?
I know where that is.
Okay, good.
That's all.
So that takes place in an area where WSU owns the land where the apartments sit on that corner. Pullman has the sidewalk, and there was a phone booth on a concrete pad just off the sidewalk in the grassy area. WSU mowed the grass. It was a Pullman phone booth. It was hard to know what the setbacks or the lines are that separate Pullman and WSU in that particular area, because it's not just the sidewalk. There's going to be some easement area in there. And if you're a map person and you work for a city long enough, you know that depending on what map you look at, you can't always tell where the boundaries really are. And the boundaries change for utilities and for property rights and for all kinds of things. And so it's kind of a question mark. Whose case is this? Who takes this case? Well, I happen to be standing doing, it was fairly new in 1990, and I was standing where I could hear the two chiefs at the time talking about who takes this case. Both were very willing to take the case, to do the investigation. The Pullman Police chief at the time said something along the lines of, we have standing detectives, might be easier for our group to spend a lot of time on this. It was an important case. And the other chief, I didn't really hear all of their conversation, but it was a pretty congenial conversation. And much like I think that we would have, should we be confronted with the same type of thing. Who's best oriented to take this case? So, seemed cool. So the Pullman officer said, how come WSU's dumping their garbage on us and making us do their thing? And the Pullman officer said, why don't they take care of their own stuff? It's on there. It was like siblings. I think that pretty well characterizes some of the interaction that we have with the two departments. We get along well. We make healthy public safety decisions. There's always going to be someone who wants to take issue, and I think that sometimes is the case. Now, there are a lot of times I could tell a dozen stories about how we intersected really, really well and dovetailed and did some great things. But I tell that story just to give you a flavor that it's not all perfect between the two departments all the time. Now, the end of all that is that nobody really ever solved that case. So WSU can say, well, Pullman did it and they didn't solve it, and Pullman can say, well, there's that sibling kind of a thing that goes on sometimes, but really it comes down to trust. I think in my time with both the Pullman Police Department and the WSU Police Department, because I have worked for both for significant amounts of time, I think 11 years with Pullman and I don't know how many at WSU, but I think I can think of times when both departments incidentally or accidentally broke trust, some stupid thing, and I can think of a lot more times when they worked really well together. If you were to ride with either police department on a busy night, you would see a great deal of interaction between departments and what looks like a wonderful relationship. If an officer is in trouble, everybody goes like it's their brother or sister who needs help. So I hope that kind of characterizes what I kind of want to talk about in terms of how we get together. Now I have to tell you a story, so it's really It's really stressful being a chief of police. Really, isn't it stressful? It can be stressful. I'll tell you one of the stresses I had this morning. I had told my wife I would be home a little bit late because I would be presenting some information to the Pullman Police Advisory Board, and she said, "I have to give you a haircut. I have to give you a haircut," and it really stressed her out, and that stressed me because she really wanted to give me a haircut, and I just didn't have time in the day for a haircut, and so she's going, "I got to give you a haircut. Got to give you a haircut." And I said, "Man, this job is stressful. I bet Gary's wife doesn't make him get a haircut."
I was going to say, I have a solution for you.
So I say that so that you know that what the kind of relationship I think the departments have is good and healthy, and not perfect. The two departments have different missions in a lot of ways. Now, when the department was conceived in 1950, the police officers went to the state academy. They were trained and authorized in the exact same way as the police departments all over the state are. So there's no difference in their authority or in their training, at least their initial training, and the big difference is in the missions of the two departments. The WSU Police Department is both public safety and property security, right? We are often the responsible party, and that's a police term for who's in charge of this building overnight when there's nobody in it. And that's not necessarily true in a municipal police department, where if you go to store X because there's somebody burglarizing it, well, you may go in and catch the burglar, but you may stay outside and call the responsible party to come and reset the alarms or tell us what you want to happen. There's a big difference there in that part of the mission. When somebody lives in the city, they're subject to landlord-tenant laws. All right, so police officers have to know landlord-tenant laws to be able to mitigate issues that might be happening with landlords versus the people who live in their properties. On campus, and don't ask me to explain this any further because I'm not a lawyer, but on campus, residents sign a contract that is a license. They're licensed to live on campus. There's a difference, and I don't know what that is. But one's a licensee and one's a tenant. And that allows universities, this is common among universities, it allows them to deal with Clery and Title IX issues that require the moving of people in residential situations to accommodate Title IX. So there's a difference there, and so when a Pullman police officer goes to deal with a noise complaint, they have a city ordinance that they enforce, and it has these rules and there's procedures behind it. And when a WSU officer goes to a noise complaint, they can use the city code because they're in the city and they have permission to use the city code to deal with that noise complaint, or they can just say, hey, I'm sending a referral to housing. Much scarier, because a license to live someplace can be revoked. Landlord-tenant laws, you can't just make noise on one night and be kicked out of your apartment. Very, very different. It's a very different way of seeing or applying laws. And so there are some differences between the departments in that way. University police officers do a lot of security details. We run money to the bank. After a football game, there's some money. Everybody thinks there's a lot of money going to the bank, but there's really just receipts going to the bank. So, but we secure those and we accompany accountants or somebody to the bank and make sure their receipts get to the bank okay. We do venue security. Obviously, we have to put on football games and graduation, and we do a lot of that kind of venue work. We look very closely at domestic and international terrorist issues on campus, and don't know if you know this, but we get a lot of computer threats to our valuable assets, or our intellectual property on campus. We have people who don't like some of the research that we do that make threats to the university, and so we try and keep track of that as best we can. We have a strong relationship with federal agencies. I know the municipal police departments have that as well, but it's just a slightly different kind of focus when we talk to the feds, I assume, because I don't ever talk to the feds with Gary, I guess, but there's a little bit of a difference there. And then I already mentioned Clery. If you're not familiar with that, it's a set of federal laws that require us to comply with some pretty onerous details when it comes to reporting. And it involves us coordinating with the city because we report some things that don't happen on campus that happen in the city in some cases per Clery law. And we also have to comply with Title IX, which means that our officers have to be pretty well versed in at least getting Title IX type information to the right place. That's not true of a municipal police officer who doesn't have to worry about Title IX. So I think I already mentioned that WSU and Pullman do well together on the street. That's police lingo for when they're just working. When Pullman is busy and they don't have enough people, you often hear them call for a WSU officer to go do something. When WSU is busy and doesn't have enough people for one reason or another, they'll call for help from a Pullman officer, and that happens constantly. The same is true of the county. There's a portion of the county east of WSU where county deputies have a hard time getting quickly, and so when there's an accident on Airport Road or maybe 270, they'll call for a Pullman officer or a WSU officer to go help them out. That's just kind of the way it's done. At the administrative level, I think Gary and I get along pretty well, but we have to watch how our departments get along, and I think it's slightly different. Our departments, I have a union, he has a union, and so we have to watch union relationships, union contracts, in what kind of enterprise we want to do together. But for the most part, I think we're friends. One of the areas that I think that we have to be really careful about is in information sharing, because we as police departments know a lot of things about each other that the press would like to know. And it's awkward if I know something about something Gary's department is working on and the press asks me because I can't speak for the Pullman Police Department, and there's a lot of pressure to speak, from the press and at times from my own administration. Although I haven't felt pressure for them in a number of years, but I have in the past felt pressure to put my nose in Pullman business, and that's a little dicey. And when Pullman has a case that they're working that involves a WSU student or a WSU person for some reason, and we need to make some sort of a WSU statement, we have to coordinate on what we say. And so somebody will call, it's either me to Gary or somebody else will call and coordinate what we say, or if we say anything. And I think that's probably one of the places where we could lose trust most. If I spoke out of turn for the city of Pullman, I think that would be a real huge faux pas. And we would take a big public relations hit, I think, potentially, if I were to say the wrong thing about something that Pullman was doing. So, all in all, we're doing okay together. Some of our current initiatives at WSU are in really improving our sexual assault investigation, and we've come a long, long way in a short amount of time in improving the way we work sexual assault cases. And I have one of my officers who's now training at the state level on that kind of an investigation. We have tried to implement a program that is called You Have Options, which allows victims of sexual assault to have a great deal of control over their investigation. We have a little bit of a hang-up in there with Title IX, which doesn't allow us always to give a victim the kind of freedom they might get in a municipality. And our officers, we're giving our officers have had specialized training in trauma-informed investigation techniques and FETI interviews, and that's all just cop speak for better ways to deal with victims or survivors, with the end goal being their ultimate health and survival, and a possible consequence being the conviction of a suspect. But it depends. And this is a best practice in the rest of the world, and campuses, I think, are trying to pick this up, and we feel like we've got at least a good start on that. I know that we see Gary's officers at some of the same training, so I know that that's an initiative that's alive and well in both departments. We are trying to increase our capacity. That's a fancy way of saying we're trying to do some training, get officers trained in de-escalation, big issue, de-escalation as opposed to escalating problems. Mental health issues, if you're alive and you're looking at any kind of police-related issues, that's a big one. Bias, want to get a good grip on that. I'll tell you what we've experienced when we do implicit bias training. About the minute after we do it, somebody with some authority or some expertise tells us we just did the wrong training because it's horrible, and what you did was just set your people back, and then we do a different kind, and then we hear the same thing, and that's sort of the nature of the beast. And as I've talked to different chiefs and I've talked to different people in those areas outside of law enforcement, they say that that's kind of their experience. And so the most recent advice I got on that was do little things, little trainings, just keep training, don't worry about what people are saying, and keep it on the minds of the officers, because the real work has to happen between here and here in each individual officer, and that will happen when they're out riding their bike or they're chopping wood or whatever they're doing. That's when that stuff is going to happen, but it has to be in front of them all the time in appropriate ways, as opposed to one big training that solves the whole problem. And obviously that's not a great paradigm for that kind of a problem. But it is a frustration for us, because everything we do, we hear was just terrible, no matter how it was presented to us. So. And also, we're working on use of force, and that came up. A couple of my sergeants attended a training not too long ago that was actually put on or hosted by the Pullman Police Department in the WSU building, and by the Washington Association of Insurance People,
Yeah.
something like that, Washington Insurance, and it got some of our sergeants thinking about use of force and wanting to train, and I believe the same thing happened with the sergeants at Pullman, and they would like to train together on some of that, and that's really, really good, and it's really positive, because it's very difficult. One of the things that's very, very difficult as a police officer is to be on a line, a jurisdictional line, where there's 2 different or 3 different departments working, and they all 3 have wildly different use of force habits. That can be really uncomfortable. Just think about that. In the dark, and the fight is on, and you're trying to handle something with 3 totally different mindsets. And so that's a very positive step for us. And I don't know where that'll go, but we're hoping that becomes a big initiative that we can both kind of share in. So I should say I'm hoping that. I don't know what Gary hopes. So I don't want anybody to miss Monday Night Football, and I would love, if you have questions about something that I've talked about here, about jurisdiction, or there's a lot more here to talk about.
Speaking of football, who
Yes.
who is security for, like, Mike Leach and the coaches and the girls soccer team?
Well, so the athletics, so when we do athletics, we work for athletics. So they ask us for 20 officers, and we provide the 20 officers. Now, we can't provide that ourselves, and so we go out and find other police departments to help us do that. And we have somebody on leash all the time, and we have in the past traveled with teams in the past. We don't currently travel with the teams, and a lot of that is decisions made by me and athletics and the coaches together. So it kind of depends on the venue. We have not secured women's soccer in the same way as we secure football, but we have patrols who go to those venues. They're not seen like you are at football, where you're actually there working the game. We do the same thing at volleyball, where we have officers kind of checking in and being around the area, but not posted at those games. And almost all of that works through a contract with athletics. So it sounds weird if you're outside of WSU, but because it just seems like, well, we're all one company and we all would just do this one thing together. Much of the time those decisions are made by 2 or 3 people who have an interest, and I'm usually involved in the decision in some way. And sometimes, a coach will say, I don't want anybody near me, and so what we generally do is have somebody around anyway, but we may not have it be as upfront. But we always have somebody with Leach, and he gets a lot of pictures taken of him in the background doing things. He owes us a lot of pizza, I think.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
How many officers do you have?
We have 22. One of those is an arson investigator, and he was a former police officer, so we allowed him to keep his commission, but he's not considered part of our regular force, but he has a commission. So 22 including him, so 21. Now, we opened in 1950 with 12. It gives you an idea of the rate of growth.
And can you explain your cadet program that you have?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to survive without our cadets. They're a resource. They're a fantastic resource, and if you don't know much about them, they are students who volunteer with our department. They go through a pretty rigorous, at least by most standards, a pretty rigorous kind of a mini academy, and they learn everything from criminal procedure to criminal law to defensive tactics to how to take a statement from a witness to patrol procedures. A lot of the stuff that the police officers learn in the academy. And they then volunteer their time to kind of be a force multiplier for us. So we will have interns that ride with officers, and we will have interns who secure areas for us. If we have a crime scene that needs securing, we can put interns on it, and they work at a lot of our dances, other kinds of events on campus as security, and for some of that they're paid. So they get kind of a mixture of paid and mostly volunteer work, and they participate in some studies by enterprising criminal justice professors, and they go on out of our department. Many of them, a ton of them, get placed in police departments. Some of them don't go the police route. Some go federal, and some go into various kinds of fields. But when they go through our state academy, they are outstanding in the academy because of the experience and exposure they've had. Even in a small town where you could say this is a pretty quiet town compared to some places, crime-wise, they have just seen it and experienced it. And so when they're in the academy doing role-playing and learning criminal law, they've had it before. And they've been there before. And they've taken statements from people. And so when they do it in the academy, they're just more natural and they have a big head start. And so they're noticed. And we hope we're teaching them a way of policing that is good for the state, because we place a lot of them. We have anywhere from 40 to 70 at any given time, probably, and they're outstanding. They're just an outstanding source of help for us. And I know Professor Macon has been involved with some of them, and he would probably say the same thing. They're great, a great resource. We love to have them come back after they've done great things at other police departments, and they come back and they visit us and they help out in our little mini academy, and it's really fun. It's a really fun thing.
So when you think about the different, you talk about jurisdictions, and so you think like Moscow, they handle the university and the town at large, and of course you each have your respective jurisdictions. How's it like? I guess could you speak to some of the challenges, or maybe why you don't have challenges in handling areas like Adams Mall, or areas where we have a high degree, or say areas, not just single that one out, areas that have a high student population, and yet kind of walk that boundary between whose jurisdiction that really is,
Yes.
and then how you move forward to help resolve those situations?
So let me just go quickly over jurisdiction. So there's a couple different words there. Jurisdiction is generally statutory. You read a law, a state law, and it says your jurisdiction is defined by this, right? So, and you could draw it on a map. With WSU, and this is not new, and this is not revolutionary, but with WSU, we exist inside of a city. Most of our land is inside of a city. We have some county land as well, but that means that our jurisdiction is within another jurisdiction who has what we would have jurisdictions together. Right? Not unlike the county, who has jurisdiction also when they're in the city, and not unlike the state, who has jurisdiction in the state. So it's not new. So this overlapping jurisdiction, or what we would call concurrent jurisdiction on campus, means that Gary's officers have jurisdiction on WSU. So that's the word jurisdiction. There's also a phrase, primary jurisdiction. So our primary jurisdiction is WSU's campus. So we respond there. We have, if we take cases, we take cases there, and we could fight over the cases with Gary, but we have primary jurisdiction and they have concurrent jurisdiction. It's a little weird to hear it that way, but it allows us, in this case, it allows us to have in a city that might normally have a lot more police officers, we're a little bit split. Moscow handles their campus and their city, and they have 40 something. I can't tell you how many they have, something like that. That's more than Pullman has, and that's a lot more than we have, double what we have. And they handle it all. Where we have sort of a split jurisdiction in a way, oftentimes I've talked about it this way. We have this moving population that moves in and out of campus. And during the day, we have around, I'm just going to use numbers loosely, 6,000 employees from Pullman and surrounding areas who come to campus. And I don't know how many students are actually on campus at any given time, because it just fluctuates so much. But 20,000 students potentially, if they all had class at the same time, could be on campus. And that's generally during the day. And then about 9,000-ish, give or take, maybe a little less, stay on campus residentially in apartments and in residence halls. The rest of them go what we call west. And after every football game, we sit together in the command post, and I say, well, I'm giving them back. You have a good time. So virtually my entire force works football, and I have a couple people left over to go through the night. But Pullman is preparing for that group of people to then move off of campus and into Pullman. And so we share this moving group. And so the jurisdictional issues aren't what get us. It's that we have people who commit crimes who we both know because they're here and then they're there. And we have to coordinate some of that. So I don't know if that's helpful or answers your question. It's a little different arrangement than say U of I, which just has no university police department. They have security guards there on campus, but the police department handles their campus.
No, absolutely. I think it's just helpful for people that are watching or here to just kind of get a sense of how you have to coordinate.
Yeah.
Because you are handling that moving population.
Yes, I like nothing better than to see everybody walk west after.
Well, and the other part of that too is we'll have a crime victim in Pullman, but then on the daytime they're on campus, and there are sometimes issues that the university needs to address because they're a crime victim.
Title IX issues sometimes, yeah. So I think if I were to take, 1990, is it almost 2020? So 30 years. I think the relationship between the departments, this is my own personal view, probably not as a chief, but just as a person who worked at both places and saw it all from the inside. I think the relationship now is about as good as it's ever been. That has to do with a couple things. One is, and I'll say this, and then I probably won't admit to saying it later. I know this is being filmed, but I'll probably deny it anyway. I believe you really, really lucked out with your chief hire. I really do, and I think that's been really, really helpful because the city could have hired a chief that said, I don't want anything to do with you campus cops. And you hired a good chief, a great chief. And so I'm really thankful for that. And I was really worried about that because it would really affect my job if I had to fight another battle here. And the other thing is that I worked really well with your city manager. Your mayor is always around somewhere with his booming voice, supportive. I have a very supportive boss, and I think the administration at WSU right now is extremely supportive of town-gown relations and our cooperation. The pressure on me is reduced somewhat from my administration to do things that I go, I can't do that. Sometimes administrators ask, because they don't know, police chiefs to do things that are like, I'm police chief, but I'm not the czar of all things. I have a really good group of administrators, is what I'm trying to say. And they're allowing us to have a good relationship as well. It's always been some little friction, and I think right now, if I don't jinx it, I think right now is pretty good. I really do. So.
Who do you report to? Do you report directly to the president?
I report to the vice president of finance and administration, and she reports to the president. And it's different under different presidents, I've learned. I've only worked under 2 presidents, but my relationship with Elson Floyd was very close. And I think that was a function of maybe circumstance, but I think maybe a little bit my boss at the time, the vice president at that time, there was just different relationships, and so I was close to a lot of people, and at this point I'm closer to my boss, who is fantastic. I could not have asked for a better vice president, and that's Stacy Pearson, and she's been a hugely supportive voice And so my relationship with the president is less necessary, I think. That didn't sound right because I had a great boss before as well, but it's just different. And I imagine if I outlast this president, there'll be a new kind of relationship. It kind of depends on how those people work, how close I am. So I imagine it's no different for your municipal chief. Sometimes the mayor's going to be close, and sometimes they're just a different style.
So then are WSU police officers university employees?
Yes.
And in that case, is the agenda and the way everything operates set through the president and the vice president? How much of an impact do they have on how you guys operate, since some of them might not have any police experience?
So that used to be an issue for me, and I don't want to name names or anything like that, but like I say, there can be pressure from people who just don't quite. It's just not their primary job. Not like a city supervisor who they've been dealing with police somewhere in their experience, and a mayor who deals with law enforcement, right? Because that's just part of that job, and it's not for a president of a university. I can tell you that right now, I don't feel any pressure to do anything weird, because I think there's a lot of trust with my boss, and my boss actually knows, that's when you get a new boss, the first thing is, okay, especially in this kind of a field, like if you get a new city supervisor, the first thing you want to know is, what do they know? Can I speak in my own language, police language with them, and they understand? And I found Vice President Pearson to be really, really knowledgeable, and anywhere she wasn't, she was willing to listen. So I'm not feeling that pressure at all right now, but I can tell you when I started, I meet with the other 5 police chiefs of universities in the state. We meet a couple times a year to cry together. Some of them just get beat by their administration. And I was given an article when I first started, and I can't remember the article. I wish I still had it, but it was so you're a new. I think the title was "So You're a New University Police Chief," and it had a description of what your life was going to be like, and it described you under the desk, wearing a Kevlar helmet, sucking your thumb, rocking back and forth, and crying. That's how the article read, and then it went on to talk about how you'd be treated and things you'd confront, and that's sometimes true. And I see it but I have been so fortunate here, so fortunate. And I hope they think that trust goes both ways, because they do sometimes have to influence what you do, right? They are sometimes your boss. So it's a good question, though. It can be very difficult. I've heard that university police chiefs' half-life is about 3.5 years, because the pressure is just incredible. So I don't know. You might know better than I do.
Well, it's tough. No, you're speaking to her. I mean, how do you balance? I mean, you're trying to balance safety with the reality that people want to come and have fun, right? And so trying to find a way to balance that, but do it in a way that doesn't alienate. So WSU gets known for being a place where you go and you get MIPs and they're constantly outing you and searching your door, all of that, then nobody wants to come. And then the university enrollment goes down. And then, right? So I think that both of you, when you spoke a couple years ago together, and you do it pretty frequently, but we had a great forum, and you were honest. I mean, we will balance it, and we'll do it in a way that you can have fun, but you're going to have to be responsible. At some part, we are here to get higher education, and so I think both departments done phenomenally well to balance that, and it's not easy.
We have a thing we do at the football games. It's kind of corny, but the officers, they practice the WET principle. Now, this is not a police thing. This is an athletics thing that came to us several athletic leaderships ago. And I think the officers, they buy it, but they also tease about it all the time. The WET principle is, welcome to the game. We hope you enjoy your experience here, and thanks for coming. And that's the experience that people are supposed to have, and that's tough when you've got them in handcuffs, right? To use the WET principle, thanks for coming. Now you're leaving. But they buy it. There's something inside them that says, yeah, that wet thing is part of what I'm supposed to do as a police officer. And I think the equivalent in a municipal police department is it's probably got a different acronym, but it's, we're here to help, and we're here to try and make your life in this community workable so that you can go on and, keep my power going or whatever, work on the roads or whatever, whatever else is that you do, or run the economy, right? Have a job and run the economy and make it so I can be employed as a police officer. There's this, we're part of an ecosystem, so. Yeah, I don't really know what my point was on that. Well, welcome to the game. Enjoy the experience, and thanks for coming.
Well, are there any last-minute questions from our audience or from anybody?
Yeah, I had another question. What do you think are your biggest challenges right now and going forward, immediate future, maybe the next 5 years? What's the biggest thing you're kind of up at night under your desk thinking about what you're going to do?
What do I suck my thumb over? Desk? Well, it's probably. Here we go. So I'm going to do it. So I said a few years ago, I took all my officers into a one-on-one, and I told them they had to love their community and their community members. And I did that with a lot of trepidation because I just thought I was going to get killed by every officer. And I used that word pretty purposefully and forcefully. I said, you have to love the members of your community, even if they're doing bad things. And I didn't get any pushback, not from one police officer. But of course the follow-up was, okay, so if that's the case, you have to love your community. What does that look like? How do you do that? And the point was in each conversation to start to talk about how does that relationship work with individuals in your community, and how do you when you have a neighbor and you need to get along with your neighbor, how do you do that? Or when you find a new friend, how do you do that? And it was a lot about sharing yourself, as opposed to sharing this blue thing that is over a lot of cops. This blue cone of I'm a cop. And that's a protective thing. And it's also a thing that can be taught to police officers, either in the academy or by their field trainers or by their experiences. How do you break out of that? And I'll give you one example, because this is the thing that I really would like to see more and more of. But one of the officers said, well, if I was going to do that, I would share something very personal about myself with people. And I said, well, what could you share? As a police officer, what would you share? And he said, well, I love cars, and I rebuild cars. I make muscle cars in my garage. And he's now put on 2 WSUPD classic car shows. Now, it cost us a couple dollars for some advertising, and I think we bought him a banner and a couple of trophies. And the time. But that's key, because I have been a part of many, many efforts to drive community relationships of all kinds, where I'm sent to a place and I sit in the corner and I'm supposed to be friends with everybody and I don't know anybody and nobody wants me there, and they can tell I don't really want to be there, and the whole program kind of stinks. But if I love cars and people are there to do cars, I get a relationship. It's been really, really good for the officers to realize my community doesn't treat me the way I get treated sometimes on graveyard patrol. My community is something that if I share, they'll share, and then we build something. And that's it for me, is that. And I said that in a group a couple of times, and then I got in the paper as the love chief. And I don't know if you know anything about police culture, but if you're the love chief in the paper, what are you in the department?
We'll be on Facebook tomorrow.
So that's the big thing. maybe that incorporates all this other stuff, de-escalation and sexual assaults and mental health and trying to see yourself as part of a community as opposed to a blue thing. So that's what I'm up tonight about.
Any other final questions from anyone? Audience?
Just hanging?
Well, thank you so much
thank you.
for coming. And I actually look forward to your next presentation on Thursday with me as well at APAC.
Well, it might be really, really similar.
You just heard it, and I'll say what he said.
That'll be good. Thank you so much. Very good. Next up is...
Don't feel like you need to stay for the rest of the meeting?
Okay.
Yeah, you can sit if you want. Or you can go and get your haircut and do some
I need to go
Monday
get a
Night
haircut. And I'm going to text you the score of the game.
I just need to know how my fantasy players are doing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, bro.
Chief Jenkins, you're up.
All right. So we already talked about creating a second commander position, and with the retirement of Chris Tennant and promoting Jake Opkenorth, I don't have anyone internally that qualifies for that commander position. So we have started a recruitment that is open through January 10th, and we have a company that after we sent out an RFP, we had 3 companies bid for that, and we selected one that will be doing an assessment center for us in February. And this is the same organization that 2 years ago did a sergeant's assessment center for us, and we really liked what they did. So it's coming up. Friday, Kayla Noxall, who is in the police academy right now, graduates from the police academy, and we'll have an oath of office for her. Her graduation is at 1 p.m. in Spokane. And then we're going to have an oath of office at the police department at 4:45 and up in the briefing room. So if anybody wants to attend that, feel free to do that. It only lasts about 10 or 15 minutes. It's really quick. So you're welcome to attend. So after Kayla, we have 4 more positions to fill. 3 of those are new. One was a vacancy. And so we have 1 applicant that's still in the background process from a previous recruitment. Our most current recruitment, we had 40-plus applications, and our civil service examiner reduced that to about 15 people to interview. And after that, 3 passed. So chief's interviews are happening this week with those 3. And for those that pass the chief's interview, we'll start a background investigation. And then we have continuous recruitment going, so we'll be having interviews again probably in a couple of months. And in addition to filling the positions we have, we also want to have a list on hand that will be good for a year. We can extend it actually for a second year for any vacancies that occur in the next couple of years. And more than likely we'll have a couple in the next couple of years. Our records specialist positions are now fully staffed. The new hirees were Amanda Nickerson and Bridget LaSalle. They're both in training. Amanda's in her very last phase, which is where she's basically doing everything on her own and is just being supervised by another record specialist. We did active shooter training for city council last week. Actually, it was earlier this week. It was on Monday night this week. No, it had Monday night. Wow, I'm way off. I thought it was Thursday. Okay. Yeah, it was last week on Monday, the night before the council meeting. So after the death of Sam Martinez, I've had a couple of meetings with the director of fraternity and sorority life, as well as fraternity and sorority leaders, to discuss a plan to address what occurred and how to prevent that in the future. Fraternity and sorority life has they do an annual retreat for their leaders in January, and we've been invited. Starting last year, we were invited to send someone there. So our College Hill officer, Tiana McNanny, will be going to that camp, and work with the leaders, and part of what their job will be to put together a plan for all the fraternities and sororities to try to prevent that type of death in the future. So we're glad to be part of that. We've offered our support in any way that we can, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with. That's all I have. May have any questions?
I have a question. How many women officers and male officers do we have?
Okay, so let's see, we have 29 officers, so of those we have Kayla now is hired, Kiana, Heidi,
Ashley and
Ashley Lamb, and Brianna Banks. So we have 5 female and 24 male, right? That puts us at 29, and we have 4 to hire. So on the current recruitment list, we're doing chief's interviews. 1 is a female, and the other 2 are male.
So animal control are separate than that?
So yeah, our code enforcement and animal control officers are separate,
Separate,
and
okay.
we have
2 and 2.
2 and 2, yeah.
Okay.
And then in records, all except 1 are female. We have 1 male record specialist. So we've actually hired, Heidi has been a female officer. She was a female officer when I got here. And we hired 1 that ended up leaving after a couple of years to move to the west side. But all the rest have been hired within the last few years. And we've just, we've been very fortunate to have female candidates rise to the top and been really good candidates for us. And so it's good to have that diversity, and I hope we get more.
You're pretty close to the national average.
Are we?
Yeah. Certainly better than sheriff's departments. But for municipal, you're probably just in line, if not slightly ahead.
Nice.
I was curious because like the last few updates, I feel like I've been hearing more women names.
Yeah,
so-
because the last academy, we had 2 females that graduated at the same time.
Any other questions? Alrighty, well, thank you very much. All right, our poll, constituencies poll. Would you like to start?
J.S. Sivakumar, Military Hills, nothing to report.
Philippe Lutsenko, Military Hill, nothing to report.
I'm Krista Gross at large, and this is my first official meeting, so I don't know if this is the place to talk about this or if it matters, but after our code enforcement presentation last month, which was excellent, I went back to some of the people in Whitman County Association of Realtors, and we have a lot of property management people there. Boy, they asked me some tough questions. Specifically, like in a certain residential area, what determines whether someone is a family? So if a boyfriend and girlfriend are living together, his sister is there, and are they related? Yeah, so all these questions. So I suggested that they speak to our code enforcement officers and keep up that that dialogue. And then they mentioned that there's some like repository, some database that we pay into to keep information up to date.
So does that group have a regular meeting?
Yes, we do. Would you like
It
to
would be
attend?
great for me and code enforcement to come.
That'd be awesome.
Because I actually have been wanting to touch, I might have mentioned this to you when we talked before you got on the board. But,
Yeah.
because there are definitions of what a family is, and different residential districts have different codes for how many people can be in a residence. And that's actually something that we're going to pay more attention to
Right.
this year and particularly next year. And so we definitely want to educate those that need to be educated with the realtors and also the landlord-tenant association as well, and the occupants and renters. But I think it'd be good if we came and did a presentation to talk about that and answer any questions that they have. We have a brand new system it's a software where, so there's a city code that requires all people with rental property to register that rental property with the city. And in the past, we've just maintained that information in a database, and it wasn't really, it was useful for us so that we could contact people in case of an emergency. we now have software where we're able to collect all that information, send out targeted emails, and have better communication. Also, when we have it, we import all of our police calls into that system, and so emails are sent out automatically to property owners when police go to a call on their property. Those emails go out once a day, but we have to have all that, the proper information in for them to get that information. And then also we now have an online system so that people can register or renew their registration online. They don't have to fill out paper forms or come in. They can do it all online. So there's been a lot of changes in that area, so it'd be perfect timing for us to do that.
Great, thank you so much. That's all I have.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Is that for short-term rentals too? Like vacation homes, like VRBOs, Airbnbs?
So if somebody lives in the home and they rent out rooms, then that doesn't really apply. It's for just, if the property is just for rental.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mira Al-Bakshi, GPSI representative, nothing to report.
Angelo Brown, multicultural, nothing to report.
David Macon, nothing to report.
Isabel Macon, final season starting soon, I guess. That's gonna suck, but
You're gonna get all straight A's, right?
no, the probably all F's.
For the Pullman School District parent, when do you guys get out of school for the holiday? Is it the 19th that you guys end? That's my update.
2 more weeks.
Yeah, and then you guys go back to school on the 9th, or what, do you know?
I think same like us, I think.
Well, we start on the 13th again. So that, I think that's when the academic school year is, on the 13th.
We never
Oh, no,
line
not
up.
that way. I guess I'm
No,
third.
they of course never line up.
It'd be entirely too challenging.
Yeah.
No, we get 2 weeks off.
We get 2 weeks off?
Just 2 weeks.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Okay, Eric Tetzoff, nothing to report.
Greg Wilson, Pioneer Hill, nothing to report.
No coyotes or anything?
No coyotes currently.
Foxes. All right, great. Well, any public comment? No? Okay. So our next meeting is January 13, the start of our spring semester at WSU. In this room again at 5:30.
So I'm going to be out of town that Monday and the following Monday. So I can send Jake again. You want to do that. And also, if you want, Dr. Macon and I were talking today, his research fellow would be able to come and do a presentation on red light cameras.
Yes, I would like to know about that, as I see red light runners all the time. What?
Red light cameras.
I'm sorry, public comment has closed. That would be a lovely presentation. We will just forget about Beaverton. That's a long ways away from here. Yeah, that'd be great. And, yeah, Jake would be wonderful. What did I call him last time?
Oh.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I couldn't pronounce his last name very well.
Jake is fine for him.
It's a tricky one.
All right, you guys all have a happy holiday. Absolutely. And we'll see you in the new year.
I want to have a happy holiday.